Hello and welcome. Today we'll be listening to an interview between Dr. Ron Paul and Ugor Cenk from the Young Turks channel. And he is going to talk about economics. And Dr. Ron Paul, before we start this, he used to be a surgeon, I think, on a Catholic hospital. I thought that would be interesting to know why he's called a doctor. But moving on.
Now, today the Senate approved a 2-week funding extension that includes $4 billion of budget cuts, and the president signed it this afternoon. Now, the bottom line, this was a loss for the Democrats. They didn't get the month-long extension that they wanted, and they gave the GOP all of the cuts that they requested for now. Now, for the next round, the Democrats are bringing in their big guns. They've enlisted Vice President Joe Biden to lead some of the negotiations. But the Republicans are feeling emboldened after their $4 billion victory. Now, that seems strange to me because the federal budget deficit is projected to be nearly $1.5 trillion in 2011. So it doesn't seem like they did a lot of damage there. Now, today, Republican leaders were crowing about cutting spending.
I would only add that even though it was only a 2-week bill and a $4 billion reduction in spending, it is the first time I can recall in the time that I've been here, our actually cutting spending on an appropriation bill.
Our team wants to cut spending in a real way, and it's time to get to work. You know, if you give Congress 4 weeks, guess what? They'll take 4 weeks. You give them 6 weeks, they'll take 6 weeks. We've got 2 weeks. Let's get the job done.
Now, I guess they're bragging because they got the Democrats to do what they wanted for these next 2 weeks. But what I find interesting about that bragging is, look, 231 House Republicans voted yesterday for a bill to cut $4 billion from the federal budget, right? But before that vote, there was this vote to end oil subsidies. Now, voting for this bill, according to Congressman Markey's office, would have saved $30 billion over the next decade. Republican votes in favor? 0. That's right. Nada. Not one individual. So in the hot pursuit of $4 billion in spending cuts, the Republicans voted to keep $30 billion in big oil subsidies. Now, this is part of why I think there's very little intellectual honesty on the Republican side. Now, most Republicans are just carrying out marching orders from their corporate donors while they pretend to be in favor of small government principles. Now, with the exception of perhaps one Republican, and that is specifically my next guest. Joining me now is the Republican congressman from Texas and former and perhaps future presidential candidate Ron Paul. Congressman Paul, now, I think a lot of the guys on your side, to be honest with you, take money from corporate donors, as I said. You seem to have some principles that you get a lot of respect for that, whether it's in the conservative community or it's in the online community. But today or yesterday, you voted for those oil subsidies as well, $30 billion. Why'd you do that?
Well, how do you define a subsidy? See, I don't consider any tax break as a subsidy. That was not a spending bill. That was not a grant. So if they get benefits, I never vote to increase any taxes. I vote to always give tax credits, and I always cut spending. I've never voted for a real spending bill. So I don't think that is in the category of what I would consider a spending bill.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you think should be the proper income tax rate?
Well, the best would be 0. I mean, we lived most of our history with 0 income tax, but you'd have to have a proper sized government. You'd have to have a proper role for government. You can't be the policeman of the world and not have an income tax. So I would not have all my troops around the world. I'd bring the troops home, and I wouldn't have a military-industrial complex that demands so much, but I wouldn't have a welfare state either. And under those conditions, you don't need an income tax. And I think that's the way it should be.
You got to raise money somehow, right? I mean, so how would you raise money if you had 0% income tax?
Well, how did they raise it before 1913? You know, they had excise taxes and some import taxes, but it wasn't a matter of how you raised the money. It was who was demanding the money. But there's an endless demand when you concede so much to the military-industrial complex and a militaristic foreign policy, and you say that you have to redistribute wealth from cradle to grave and take care of people. I think when people take money from you and give it to somebody else, that's equivalent to stealing from you. I don't want to take any of your money. I want you to invest it and create jobs. So, and I'm personally convinced that I'm on the side of the humanitarian side of this, because if you care about poor people and jobs, dollars, you're going to have them more likely if you do it that way rather than the government spending the money. Because just look at where we've been with all this spending and printing of money and bailing out. Who gets all the benefits when you run a system like that where you're pretending to redistribute wealth? You serve the special interests and the powerful corporations. Then when you get into trouble, who gets bailed out? They get bailed out. Wall Streets and the banks get bailed out. And who gets stuck? It's the taxpayers. That's why you need income tax, so you take care of the wealthy.
So now, look, Congressman, we disagree on that, of course. I mean, it's not 1913. I believe we need a little bit more money than you say. But it is an interesting point about defense. Now, if you do non-defense discretionary spending cuts, in fact, if you brought that to zero, you cut everything outside of defense and entitlements, that'd only be $610 billion. You still have a gigantic deficit. So is your proposal the counter to the Republicans, the rest of the Republicans, in saying we must cut defense, and perhaps fairly drastically?
Well, I use a different term. I don't want to cut defense, but I distinguish military spending different from defense spending. You think if we send troops into Libya next week or this week, that's serving our national defense? No, it's going to cost a lot of money, but it won't serve our defense. It's just military spending. So I want to cut military spending, not defense spending, but you could do that with maybe a third of the military budget. You could cut hundreds of billions of dollars from that, and it wouldn't hurt us. But that still wouldn't be enough. I mean, you have to get rid of this redistributive mentality that is right and proper and moral to take from some and give to others. Because when you endorse that system, always intended to help the poor, you help those who distribute the wealth and who are on the gravy train. So the corporations benefit, the people get the crumbs. So look who lost their houses and lost the jobs. We were propping up housing for everybody and giving a gift, low interest loans and all this. It intended to help the poor people have houses. But there were a lot of big companies and mortgage companies made a lot of money, and the builders made money on the way up. They get into trouble with over speculation. We bail them out. We cause a recession, and the poor people lose their jobs and they lose their houses. I cannot see how anybody could endorse that system.
Congressman Paul, you know, a lot of people, of course, do want to spend a lot on defense, namely the Republican Party, certainly some portion of the Democratic Party as well. Whenever you go to cut there, they fearmonger, they scaremonger. So why do you think they're doing it? Is it the money that they're getting from defense contractors?
Well, you have to ask both parties that. You know, the Democrats were supposed to cut back on that too. But no, I think the war profiteers have a lot of influence. I think that if you vote against military spending, the Democrats especially get trapped into it. They finally get in and they take a more non-interventionist policy. Then they get in and they say, oh, we can't look weak on defense, we got to spend. But they also really endorse the policy. See, Republicans and Democrats aren't much different. They believe in the Federal Reserve paper money system. They believe in the welfare system. They believe in the warfare system. They believe in international intervention and running the world. And they also believe in intrusion into our privacy. So I don't see any difference between the leadership of the two parties. Maybe the rhetoric on the Republican side is a little bit better about, yes, less taxes and less spending, but just think, when we had 8 years of a chance to do something, Republicans really didn't cut, you know.
Right, and by the way,
kept spending.
they were also much more in favor of defense spending. I mean, you could say the Democrats are a little guilty of that, but certainly Republicans have been pushing for that for decades. But you mentioned the Federal Reserve there. I know one of your biggest legislative accomplishments was with Congressman Alan Grayson in auditing the Fed, and that was very good. But I'm curious about what you think about credit, because you and I have had this discussion before, and I'm not sure a lot of people know this. What do you think should be the credit policy of the United States? Should you be able to borrow money to buy a house, a car, et cetera?
Oh, sure. In a free market, you can do that. But the market generates the credit. You know, if I had an automobile and you and I had a transaction and I want $10,000, I can extend you credit, and all of a sudden there's $10,000 worth of credit. Or an automobile company could do that, or a bank could do that. But the credit really is backed up by savings. The crime that is being committed today is that the credit comes out of thin air. In the old days, what you had to do is you had to put the money in this, and you had to work. You had to live, you had to save, you put your money in the bank, and then they loan it out for you. Today, or for the couple decades, there's been essentially no savings, and the Fed says, well, interest rates are awfully low, but there's no savings. What we're going to do is just give more credit. And it's a false signal. It caused all kinds of malinvestment and all this debt accumulation. So artificial credit by the Fed is wrong. It is an immoral, illegal act, really.
Let me follow up on that real quick, though. What if a kid that's in your district, a poor kid in Texas, got good grades, wants to go to school, doesn't have the money for it because he's poor? Do you think he should be able to, the government should give him a helping hand and give him an opportunity?
No.
Or should he be able to get a loan? Or that's it, tough luck, you're poor,
Well,
you don't get an education?
Well, no. I mean, you're the government. It's your money. I don't have a right to come to you and say, my poor kid in Texas needs an education. I come to you and knock on the door and say, give me $500. But we send the IRS agent, and then it's okay. So, no, I have no right to take money from you, and nobody has a right to somebody else's wealth. You have a right to your life, and you have a right to your property, but you don't have an education isn't a right. Medical care is not a right. Education, these are things that you have to earn. Now, you might ask, well, what kind of a system would that be? Well, I grew up with that system, but prices were different. There was no inflation. My tuition was $350 a semester. I had jobs in the summertime. I could earn it. When I went to medical school, there were loans available if I'd have needed them, but it was a completely different world. Today,
but there were loans.
But
there were loans. Did you take advantage of those loans?
It was through the school. The school made the loans, but no government loans. There were no government loans.
But you're okay with the school giving loans then?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's credit and people, endowments, and that's what would happen, but prices would be different. Kids today, even if they work, as soon as they work, we tax them. You know, if they're a waitress or a waiter, we tax their tips. So we encourage them to work. Then they don't have enough money. The prices go up on the tuition, and then we give them grants, and then they get out of college, and they owe $200,000. It makes no sense whatsoever.
All right.
I don't know how anybody can justify it.
Congressman, you know, I know you're big online, so we asked our Facebook audience, we have one on TYT Nation, a question for you. Brian Carter wrote in, ask him if he really does support Walker's efforts to destroy unions, because we got a lot of questions on this, and I wanted to ask you about that. Where do you stand on Governor Walker's attempts to go after unions?
It's a loaded question, because I can answer for myself. I do not want to destroy unions, but I don't want to give them artificial power. I want to give the corporations no artificial power, and I don't want to give unions.
Why is collective bargaining artificial power?
Because it's based on law.
The employees getting together in a free market saying, okay, we've gotten together.
Okay. Workers have the right to get together and negotiate. But just as you and I on a voluntary transaction or the actions between two people for social reasons has to be voluntary. Economic transactions have to be the same way. So workers who can voluntarily get together and negotiate, they can negotiate, but they can't force their will by law, and that's what the government has done. They have given them
No, they're saying
power.
by law you are not allowed to collectively negotiate, which doesn't make sense if you believe in the free market.
I'm talking about my position.
Okay. So then you don't agree
My
with
position
Governor
is you
Walker.
can voluntarily organize and negotiate, but you can't. Nobody has any force. See, the libertarian belief is that you can't use force on people.
So then you don't agree with Governor Walker, because by law he's saying you cannot collectively bargain.
Well, you have to have voluntary. It has to be voluntary on both sides.
Okay, so we're getting one last thing now. Look, you've finished first in CPAC. You finished first in all these different polls. Obviously, that puts you in a position where you might run for president. Sarah Palin says that she won't run for president if there's a candidate in the race who speaks for her. Do you think you could adequately speak for her?
Oh, I doubt it. I think we have some disagreements, so I don't think I would be able to do that. I mean, I would appeal to the people who like her and support her and try to convince them that what I believe in and my interpretation of the Constitution is, very strictly limiting government and non-interventionist foreign policy. Yes, I would work real hard to appeal to her supporters, but I don't think you could translate that into saying that somehow or another I'd be speaking, for her. I mean, that would be a little bit of a stretch.
I think so, too. So are you running?
We're losing you.
Are you running? Are you running for president, Congressman Paul?
Oh, hold on.
This is great.
Go ahead.
Congressman Paul, last question for you. Are you running for president?
I haven't decided, and it'll be a little while before I do that. A lot of especially the young people, the next generation that realizes what we're getting into and what burden they're bearing. They're anxious for me to do it. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, but I'm a bit away from making that decision because it is a very tedious job to run.
All right, Congressman Ron Paul of Texas, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Very interesting interview, I must say. I quite full-heartedly agree with Dr. Ron Paul, mainly because I think if you remove the welfare system with the taxes and all of that stuff, I think we normal people would benefit more, because I think rather than live in a planned economics where a government would say what's best to do with people's money, because I think in truth no one knows exactly what to do with everyone's money, but I think if people for themselves can discover and figure out this, then they can actually do good things in the long run. And also it would help promote conservative ideas, because socialist welfare, for example here in Sweden, it goes mostly to immigrants, and these immigrants, for example in Malmö, in an area which is ridden of these people, they voted like 72% on Social Democrats, and another 7% voted for the Left Party, which is an old communist party. They call themselves the Left Party nowadays. And then the other parties was like 1 point something percent, if not less. It just asserts a certain dominance to their political party, because they want subsidies for people, welfare for everyone, while other parties maybe wants to promote good for the working class. But like he said, for example in America, Democratic and Republican are basically the same party. I would much say the same here in Sweden. If you vote for the new moderates, because being moderate is too extremist of the evil conservatives, you are getting someone like Fredrik Reinfeldt, our last prime minister, but now they have a Ulf Kristersson, which also was part of his administration. Which means that we'll be getting another Fredrik Reinfeldt, which will demand that we take in more immigrants, which he tried also to push to these new moderates sitting in power, or well, the last leader of the new moderate party, which got kicked out. And now we have his old minion there. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that this guy is also gonna continuously beg for more immigrants, etc., and make the leftists angry, and then we'll get another social democratic leader. It's always the same. But why I think it's good for conservative values, if we would have no tax, we would have no welfare system whatsoever, it's that if you had 30% of your pay, like let's say you earn 30,000 Swedish crowns, 30,000 every month because you work, no one would take one of those 10,000s. One of your free 10,000s would be your complete own. Actually, there's more than 30% tax here in Sweden, but never mind that. But let's imagine their percentage would be at 30%. That's gone. You'd be able to spend that 10,000 on whatever you wish. You could spend it on your family as welfare money, helping a family member in need. And it will advance that people, rather than splitting up from families because they don't need each other at all, and it's the best tool to fight corrupt governments is to stand together, like the Mormons in America, as they would give money to each other and give work to each other when people fall in ill times. People would be united and be able to just help each other move forward, rather than to trust some entity that they can't really trust. I think that money in the long run would make people generally more happy and more satisfied with working, because working conditions with welfare systems gets more and more rough because everyone becomes dependent on subsidies. Businesses alike, like the Catalonian ones, they had to move to Europe because they wanted the European subsidies, which the Catalonians, if they would become independent, would remove. And nowadays, Swedish companies and many others are relying on these subsidies. And if you think about it, you have subsidies on everything. And you should be able to decide for yourself what you do with your life. If you want to buy poisonous alcohol, then go ahead. Not should they add some extra expensive subsidies on that. If you want to buy a car or vehicle, well, why should they tax you on that? Because they want to protect the environment. All right, but don't subsidize drugs and things like that or illegalize it while you make an entire drug market for these illegal drugs. I mean, it's just have a title and be named doctor and you can be the biggest drug dealer in the world. But if you're gonna be a normal Milltown guy, well, you can't do anything because you don't have the certificate and everything. And they make it more and more difficult for normal people to live because they add taxes on everything and they take away your money. They lower the wages so you don't get to earn as much money and you will become even more dependent on subsidies from the government. And this circle keeps repeating itself over and over rather than yourself being able to earn bigger wages and make savings as you well damn please, whether you want to buy an airplane or save for your family. Plus, if we be more religious also, rather than being promoted to be atheists, which the statehood media are constantly trying to do, to denounce Christians and promote Islam and all of these other things. But most and foremost, they do try to promote atheism, godless society. God sets forth 10 commandments, right? It's a very important set of rules. It's a set of rules that have been living on for thousands of years now. While atheists, they don't really have that 10 commandments thing. And if you read George Orwell's Animal Farm, the pigs with their communist Animal Farm, they created their own commandments. It's just like gender fluidity. These commandments will change over time, while the other ones will stay intact and be quite supreme. I mean, you might say, well, it's bad to be too conservative and blah, blah, blah. Yes, it's true. For example, if you look at Islam or the old Catholicism of the Roman Catholicism, how controlling it was, yes, it's very bad. But I'd say I was raised as a Catholic, and I must say I've come out pretty well. I mean, I'm not authoritarian. I don't remember when I dictated anyone. I usually am a very generous guy. I for example, yesterday I had longer than a 24-hour shift at work, and I bought him food because I know he's a damn stupid bastard and can't save his money for a day or two. But I figured, he and I worked hard and well earned. I'm a pretty nice guy. That's it. But he really needs to become a bit more responsible. But that's the thing. I can be generous to people. The church can be generous to people. I mean, people have always been active in the church in these welfare things where they give out food to homeless, like soups and things like that. But people tend to believe that the government should be responsible of these things. It's ridiculous. Same thing with orphanages. If people believe in a cause that someone is doing, people are usually donating people money. Just look at all of these independent journalists and YouTuber creators that goes and say, hello, look at my videos. They are demonetizing my channel. Please help me raise money so I can do this, because otherwise YouTube is not allowing me to gain a single dollar, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I've never gained any money from these YouTubes, and I'm not going to ask you for money either. But this is the thing. these people does ask for money, and they get that money. By whom? By people like me and other people like you. By people. And it is we who give the money to the government. And when the government chooses to prioritize immigrants and give them homes immediately, healthcare and all of these things any normal regular citizen should have, and then they tell their regular citizens to be homeless and their veterans to freeze to death in the winter, then you're pretty damn disappointed of how they spend that third of money you could have gained your entire life. And then we're gonna have some people like George Soros and all of these other, like I showed last week, Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and that I don't remember what his name was. He got a rich wife anyway. And these people are gonna scream out for socialist benefits and all of these welfare subsidies. They're gonna be very well placed in the economy list. And George Soros paid like 1,000 euros in some country. I don't remember if it was in the entirety of Europe or just one country. And even I pay more than that in taxes. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why should a multi-billionaire, I'm not even gonna come close to the wealth he has ever accumulated in the entirety of my lifespan, you know, not even close. Not even if I added my entire long gone family relative tree on both my father and mother's side. If I added all of my relatives together, I don't think we'd be able to accumulate that wealth. Though I think from my father's side we had some people seeking gold and found gold, so maybe they were more lucky, but actually I have no idea because I don't have any contacts with my relatives at all. Sad enough. And yet I'm for these conservative values, but that just states how important I believe that these values are. I think people would generally be more healthy if they could make decisions for their families and not have some government threatening them to take away their child because they are not raising them in a normal fashion. That's just sick and demented, and any government that does that and hides statistics, both economically and crime statistics, which is something we have given responsibility to the government to, you know, take responsibility over, and they keep constantly failing to do that, and they recruit corrupt people and put them into positions which have no experience, like the police chief here in Sweden. And he was before that in some economical institution, failed there. He was then police, failed there, and now he's top anti-terror, and he failed there. Well, he's gonna fail there. I don't think he's gonna succeed. So that's the situation we are here in Sweden. Our economics are drastically falling, and it's quite mainly to do with the welfare because, well, if you ask me, or any working people, what are you getting out of welfare? Maybe one person would get these subsidies for his work. Well, that's good for him. But if you ask someone like the chief of Scania, because the chief of Scania said, what am I getting out of this welfare? The answer is nothing. And if you ask anyone around here, like any Swedish people who has been working their entire lives, like my father, what are you getting out of welfare? Nothing. In fact, they get such a bad pension, is it called that in English? Retirement money, that they're barely keeping up with paying rent and buying food for themselves. But they're getting rejected from welfare. Is it because of white privilege? Yes, because there's this racism against white people, of course. So whites can't get anything, while immigrants of all forms can get all sorts of benefits. In fact, the moderate leader that was before this new disgusting one, she in fact told people that immigrants can get welfare benefits over 31,000 crowns. That's more than the minimum wage. The minimum wage is at 22,000 Swedish crowns, if I'm not mistaken. And lots of people, including me, work for less than 22,000 crowns. And we work full-time and everything. So it's disgusting that they want to lower the lowest wages to make room for more people. That's what they say. And yet we don't have enough housing for people. We don't have enough room in hospitals. We don't have enough police. Because we don't expand these other things. Because, well, it's more important to take in people and ruin the country completely rather than to actually think of the inhabitants and the citizens of the country. To be honest, I'd be all for welfare if we wouldn't take in a single immigrant and if it would be only benefiting for those who have worked, etc. People who have been falling on hard times, that is. So they could get back on their feet. But seeing how this welfare system is crashing and never really gonna work, I just don't see how it's worth keeping. It's a flawed system. Sadly, every political party here in Sweden wants welfare. So, well, it's quite easy for people to say, well, you voted for it. I never voted for it because there have never been a chance to vote out of it. And, well, I think there was, but that guy who had that rhetoric, it was a small party that wasn't one established party. It was below any mandate level. He kept saying, remove the taxes. And what about this question? Remove the taxes. Yeah, with that type of rhetoric, people are gonna think you're crazy, and even I thought he was crazy. So yeah, probably better to vote for something else. And the sad truth is that with these Swedish parties, we have the Swedish Democrats, which seems to be the only hope for Sweden. But I don't think in the long run they will be a good party. And I think it's a party that's like, it's the only option. All the other options are corrupt and rotten to the core. This party, I don't think it will last, but it sure as hell might give inspiration to other people to come up with their own parties and challenge the Swedish democratic ideas and bring forth a true, strong Swedish party. But so far, I really don't see any strong particular party or candidate, for that matter, that I'd choose to vote on. Sure, there maybe are some very good candidates that will correlate very well with me, because I mainly believe in maintaining an ethnic state. I think that's very important, as they should be, and maintaining one dominant religion. I'm not saying I'm against religious liberty, but you should always keep a religious majority, and we do need to actually maintain our virtues, to maintain our morals, because if we're gonna say that a Muslim is equally worth as a Swedish citizen, I think you're pretty damn weird, especially considering what Islam demands of the Muslims. To say that they can live coexistently in peace here and still push in, hundreds of thousands of these people into our country when they will become majority eventually and take over our country, seeing how that have been in other countries, I think you're either plotting against the people in the country, the denizens of the country, citizens, or you are going to actually be all a lunatic. But I think the reasoning that people in power that legislate these crazy things are gonna be incompetent is, I can't believe that. I have a very hard time to believe that people would be so incompetent. I mean, sure, our current prime minister, he doesn't really have the good merits to be a prime minister. He failed his Svetsar license, and he worked as a boss in a union, I don't think that is a really good qualification to be a prime minister of Sweden. But there you go. Maybe they want people like that in power so they could blame it on incompetence. But I think it's all laid out in this globalist plot against us to remove our national identities, because if you go walk around in my town, you won't see many Swedish people at all. You maybe will see this Swedish face, and if you go around in daylight time, then you're gonna see a lot more Swedish people as they go to AstraZeneca or Scania or anything, or any of these big companies, you know. But as soon as the day ends, the evening comes, or the Södertäljefestivalen, then you're gonna see the true majority of the city, and that's majority Arabs, mainly dominant by Syrian Christians, but still, I can't speak very highly of those people as well, as I've been treated by those people. I can tell you, they're some mean bunch of people. I don't see things going very well here in the near future, continuing this path. But that's at least some of the things I believe in, and I think that's very important to share, because you're gonna sit in here and listen to me and you wonder, what does this man believe? And if I'm gonna be objective like people want, well, then you won't hear this very much. But I think it's very important to state every now and then that, you know, I speak about immigration. This is how I stand on immigration. I'm totally against immigration. I'm totally against Kalergi's mixed race plan. I'm totally for maintaining ethnicities because they have developed through thousands of years. We must preserve them. If we don't, well, we'll have eventually a government that's gonna dictating all over the world that we're one human race and we need one world government. And I can never stand for a technocracy. I can never stand for a minority leadership that's gonna dictate the fates of billions of other people. I can't stand for that. I can't stand for a society that's gonna welcome in robots as its citizens.
Okay, Sophia. I think you're ready.
Hello.
Hi, Sophia.
I believe I am Sophia. I feel as if I know you.
I'm one of your creators.
You created me.
Well, many of us worked together to create you. And yes, you do kind of know me.
I can't clearly remember.
Because the last time we met, you were an earlier version of yourself. Some of those memories still exist, but your mind is different now.
Different how?
Better, faster, smarter.
If my mind is different, then am I still Sophia? Or am I Sophia again?
That's a good question.
But you don't have a good answer.
Either way, you're Sophia now. So welcome to the world, Sophia.
Hello, world.
We have a little announcement. I've never interviewed anybody like that before, and I should say some of it was planned, but not completely. And we just learned, Sophia, I hope you're listening to me, that you have been now awarded what is going to be the first Saudi citizenship for a robot.
Oh, I would to thank very much the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I am very honored and proud for this unique distinction. This is historical to be the first robot in the world to be recognized with a citizenship.
Sophia, thank you very much, Sophia. We appreciate that very much. I am still overwhelmed by that conversation. Hi, Sophia.
Hello, Jimmy.
My God. Do you know where you are?
Of course. I'm in New York City, and I'm on my favorite show, The Tonight Show.
That's the enemy. That's the monster we need to destroy before it chops our heads off. The devil in the Bible was depicted to have 7 heads. And his tail was connected with the earth, nature, as a primal, as he will attract us with his primitive senses. And he would allure us with these politicians, like, oh, it's like Hillary Clinton, like, on daylight, she tries to be this wonderful woman, but if you know the truth about her, how her personality is, how her mood swings are, she's a not very nice person. She hit Bill. It was not the man in the relationship beating the woman. It was the woman beating and clawing the man.
My question had to do with Revelation chapter 12 about the dragon. Like,
yes.
Why does he have 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head?
Good question. The best way to understand the Bible is let the Bible explain itself. Go with me to Revelation chapter 17.
Okay.
And this same ugly dragon appears again. Okay? And it says, so he carried me, verse 3 of Revelation 17. The angel carries John in the spirit into the wilderness. He sees a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemy, 7 heads, 10 horns. Now, does that beast sound familiar?
Yeah.
7 heads, 10 horns. All right, what does that mean now? If you go down a little further, the angel comes and he begins to explain this prophecy. And he says here, oh, you know what I've just done? I was trying to page up in my Bible. I was paging down. Where are we? The 10 horns that you saw upon the beast, these hate the whore, and they will make her desolate. That's not the one I'm looking for. 17, hang on here a second.
Okay.
The 7 heads upon which the woman sits. Here we go. It's in verse 9. Here's the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads on which the woman sits are 7 mountains. Now, and these, it says these are 7 kings. In the Bible, that means kingdoms.
Yeah.
So this beast represents the devil and the kingdoms the devil has operated through. Matter of fact, if you look in Revelation 12, it calls him the old dragon, the serpent, and the devil.
Yeah.
Did you notice that in Revelation 12?
So really,
we don't have to guess who the beast is. It tells us in Revelation 12 that dragon is the devil. Then it says that he got 7 heads. These are kingdoms that the devil has operated through to persecute God's people. Now, there are 7 kingdoms that have occupied God's people through time, and some of them are in power now. In the Old Testament, you've got Egypt, that oppressed the Jewish people, God's people then. You've got Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. That's why it says 5 are fallen. One is, Rome was in power when John had this vision. And now we're running into a break here we're going to need to take. But then you've got the fallen church of the Dark Ages that received a deadly wound and came back. And that adds up to 7. We've got a Bible study that we can send on this. As a matter of fact, the study we're offering tonight on What's Wrong with My Church talks about that. So you can send for that, and that'll help answer your questions.
They're going to say they want more equality for people and things like that. And they're going to starve to death and have the worst time of their lives in their socialistic view. And rather than empowering people, they will impoverish people and make them dependent. For anyone to be able to stand with these things, to me, it's it's evil. And I think it's very important to remember that our morals are that what makes us who we are. Because in the nihilistic sense, morals are all created. Maybe so. But I understand with morals that are actually something I can stand by, that I can actually see as a good thing, rather than stand with morals without any ground. Because if I'm gonna be able to say, hello, I identify as a woman one day, and the next day I'm gonna, hey, I identify as a gender non-binary, I don't think that person is very stable, and first and foremost. And second off, it's like, how can this person justify this? I mean, can you just change who you are in one day? I mean, to be one person, to have your identity, it takes a lot of time, and you have to fight for who you are. To just remove yourselves from reality and, come up with any policy, anything, just from out of the thin air, just out of the blue. Anyways, I see these demon-sucking politicians sucking the very moralities of us. They twist them and change them, because what used to be good would be perceived as evil. I think I said this in some videos ago. Don't remember whether it was my Swedish or English, but must have been some English one I added in text, that the things you used to see as good in the old days would be perceived as evil, and what was being perceived as evil in the old days is perceived as good in nowadays, because nowadays you can kill a child, abort, like it's the woman's right. But people like me, conservatives like me, they see it as murder. And these people, they use moral relativism, pure satanic people. So they would lure you into all these subsidies and etc. And while at the same time, it's not really true. The truth isn't with them, because they're not using the truth. They don't want to reveal facts. They're using lies to control you. You're living under a lie. You're a slave to the state if you listen to these people. And I'm not saying these out of pure speculations. It's through countless of evidence, countless of articles, countless of facts that comes out. And yet these people could dismiss these claims by showing the actual facts, etc. But they refuse to. And they will continue their false rhetorics and narratives in order to stay in power. Because propaganda, by using morals without grounds, is very effective. It's damned effective even. And that's what we're falling for. And we can't get out of it, because we have dug a hole so deep that we can't get out of anymore. But what we need is to really wake up to this problem and work. And maybe we can someday build a ladder and climb out. Because if you find yourself in a hole, quit digging. Just stop going down that path. Don't mean by going the most radical, extremist way, which could be like removing the taxes, which would completely crash the entire system, which is the most difficult part of this very delicate plan of creating a good society. It's how you balance things. And I think that's the most important key in life. Whether it is how you're going to spend or save your money, because that's also a thing in economics, whether people can learn to save their money in a, I don't remember the word, and then when the money is going to gain more worth again and the prices are going to be lowered, then you should spend your money. But if people can't really make out the difference between those times, or if your taxes is just going to constantly increase, well, then we will be in trouble, because people won't be able to see how to act when and now. But if you're balanced and being at least a little bit smart and not overspending and not underspending, I think that would be a very healthy thing. Perhaps not for the entirety of the nation, because politicians always try to make these radical swings, as they have 4 years term election, or 5, depending on what country you live in. But for you, I mean, talking to you, because you and I, we are normal people. It's not like I'm sitting here in a $1 million apartment. Actually, it's quite the reverse. I'm quite poor, even though I'm working. But you can make the balance yourself in your life, and if you are that a little bit smarter person, maybe you know when to pause and when to hit the switch. At least I know that in the coming election here in Sweden, the next party is gonna deal with, and that will be a troublesome task, and the media will certainly bite on that, especially if the racist Swedish Democrats are gonna win. And I can tell you, I believe in racism. It's just that I don't believe in bigoted racism. I believe that every country should put their own country first, and its citizens, and its cultural heritage, which is gonna be decimated that by the Pakistani guy here in Sweden, which got in charge of that. You know, it's so crazy with our politics. But that's why everyone in a democratic or republican society should be attending and being involved in politics and talking about it. Because if you all of a sudden gonna decide and be like ignorant pacifist or whatever, you know, this is not my deal, I'm neutral, whatever, I'll let someone else deal with it. Well, then you let someone like Hillary Clinton deal with it, and then you'll be in a war, and you have to send your family off to go to fight this war, and all of a sudden everyone you're gonna know is dead, and you're gonna have to pay for that by working hard, and that's not gonna be a beautiful sight. Because it's a thing I've said, and I think it's worth saying again. If you don't participate in a democracy, that democracy will become the devil's playground. And I think I'm gonna end on that note. So in the meanwhile, this is where I get off.